Hello, everyone. I am Amy Oberholzer, the Executive Director at Catch. Thanks for being with us today. For those of you new to our Lunch and Learn series, our guest, Beth Ayn Stansfield, will speak for about 30 minutes. Then she will take questions. Please put any questions that you have in the chat, and we will get to as many of them as we can. Right before the Q&A begins, I will introduce Lisa Bloom from Eating Recovery Center, who will share some local resources with us all. I want to remind you that the event today is being recorded. Today's program comes somewhat full circle for me. Catch exists because of my journey parenting a child with mental illness and severe anorexia. I am proud to be hosting this event, an honest conversation about eating disorders, so that our community can begin to understand eating disorders better, how intertwined they really are with one's mental health, and just how brutally tough they can be. Today, we will learn that help is out there, and successful treatment, while not easy, is absolutely possible. Our speaker, Beth Ayn Stansfield, is the National Family Advocate for Eating Recovery, Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center. She too has supported a child through recovery from an eating disorder. And during that time, Beth Ayn began what is ongoing training in eating disorders and mental health first aid. Beth Ayn has an extensive background in education and counseling and brings lots of experience working with families and educators to her role at ERC. Catch welcomes Beth Ayn Stansfield.
Thank you, Amy, for that gracious introduction. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here with you all so we can get started. All right, let's see. Okay. Again, thanks, Amy, for that introduction. I really appreciate being here with you all today. What brings me here actually is my daughter. This is my older daughter, Carly. She was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder midway through middle school. And then prior to high school, she was diagnosed with an eating disorder. Before we get started, I want to say that I am happy to report that after a very difficult, challenging journey, she is in a solid place of recovery. She's 24 years old. I like to say she's in remission, because her brain is not fully developed. That doesn't happen until you're around 26 years old. And I want to give her a little bit more time out there. But right now, again, she's in a solid place. She's enjoying her life after college and living in Denver, Colorado. So for today, I hope to raise awareness, offer a little insight around eating disorders while sharing some of Carly's story. Now, I want you to please keep in mind that eating disorders are one of the most complex mental illnesses. Because of our time being somewhat limited, I'm referencing resources throughout the talk. And then what I'll do is I'll send a resource guide at the end of the week. I'll also include my contact information so you can follow up at any time if you like. So I have around 30 minutes to talk, and then what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Lisa, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. So on this call, I realize we probably have some individuals who are new to eating disorders, and you all are concerned about a loved one. We probably also have some individuals who are supporting someone who does have a current diagnosis, and you're looking for resources. And I would also imagine we have some individuals on here who are just curious. You're wanting to know more about eating disorders. So again, my goal, I'm going to do my best to have at least 3 takeaways for each one of you by the end of this talk. Oops. Okay. So as we launch into this, I want to mention a few general facts, especially for those of you who are newer to this. So I pulled from this recognized document in the field. It's entitled The 9 Truths of Eating Disorders, and it was created by the Academy of Eating Disorders. So there's a number of things I want you to be aware of. First off, eating disorders can affect anyone. Second thing is, many people with eating disorders look healthy, yet may be extremely ill. And as a matter of fact, the majority of individuals who are struggling are either within their weight range or above their weight range. So with my daughter, Carly, if I were to show you a picture of her 1 week before she was to go away to higher level of care for treatment, just by looking at that picture of her, you would have not been able to identify her as someone who was struggling with an eating disorder, much less someone who needed to go away to higher level of care. The other thing I want you to realize that families are not to blame, and actually we can be our loved ones' best allies in treatment. The other thing is eating disorders are not choices. They are not willful acts. They are serious, biologically influenced illnesses. Many folks in the field refer to eating disorders as brain illnesses. The other thing I want to mention is that genes and environment play important roles in the development of an eating disorder. Gosh, there's around 60 to 80% of individuals who are struggling that actually had a genetic vulnerability for this illness. The last two things I want to mention is everyone's eating disorder is unique to them, and treatment is not a one size fits all. So what might be appropriate for one individual and family might not be the best fit for another. And then the last thing I want to mention here is that full recovery from an eating disorder is absolutely possible. So having said that, how does an eating disorder really come about? There are many different paths to the development of an eating disorder. So I want to briefly share Carly's story. I'm going to make a long story short for you all. In her first year of middle school, she developed a cough. And initially, she was diagnosed with a rare case of whooping cough in our state. I come to you all from Virginia. And I was told by the specialist, keep her on homebound for a couple of weeks, let it run its course, and then she'll be back to normal. So this cough persisted, and actually she started to crumble emotionally and mentally. So back to the specialist we went. Come to find out, she didn't have the whooping cough. What she was struggling with was an anxiety disorder that was presenting itself through this cough. So we got her diagnosed, we got medication in place and a therapist. She stabilized, and we continued to treat her anxiety disorder and later her OCD. So this is where the story starts. She returns to school. The students and the staff, they were so great. They were welcoming her. So good to see you. We missed you. We're going to make sure we help you catch up on your work. And wow, Carly, you really look great. You lost some weight. And of course, when you're coughing, you're not tapping into your sleep, and you're certainly not eating like you normally would have. So in fact, she had lost some weight. Well, it wasn't 2 weeks later that she announced to me, Mom, I'm going to get healthier. I am going on a diet, and I'm going to start by eliminating sweets. And so as a parent, even my pediatrician said to me, well, who doesn't want their kid to eat healthy and to eliminate sweets and soda? And I thought, well, I don't know, because kids normally eat cookies, and on occasion you have a soda. Well, Carly stayed true to her word, and for around 2 weeks stayed away from sweets, and then actually started running. And I thought, again, as a parent, wow, this is really great. I happen to be an avid runner myself, and I thought this will be something we can do together. This is a healthy lifestyle. She even joined after-school track team. Well, within a month, she also started eliminating carbs because she thought that was going to help her up her game as a runner. At the same time, she was becoming a little bit more obsessed actually with exercise, specifically running. She was running when the weather was bad. She was running when she wasn't feeling well. It seemed to become more of a task rather than something that she enjoyed. At the same time, and now we're looking at 8 or 10 weeks out, I noticed that she really had narrowed her food groups. And so my daughter was now having fruits and vegetables and chicken. I also at this time started to notice a shift in her moods. There was irritability. I started to notice some sadness. She just seemed kind of down, disconnected. She loved going to school still, but she was isolating from her friends, avoiding going out, especially when it was an occasion that involved food. And she was starting to spend more time in her bedroom. And of course, she was dropping in weight. So it was at this point, I thought, wow, you know what? We're 3 months out and something is just not right. It's not sitting well with me. And so we went to see her pediatrician. Thank goodness she had some knowledge around eating disorders, and Carly was diagnosed with an eating disorder. Now we know, and I know this now, that dieting is a gateway behavior. It is one of the greatest risk factors for the development of an eating disorder. And I really appreciate this article that the American Academy of Pediatrics actually just put out there. And this article, it centers around recommendations for the prevention of obesity and eating disorders. And the title says it all: No More Diets and Other AAP Recommendations. And I thought, wow, I wish I would have had my hands on this article a couple of months prior to this diagnosis. There was no way for me to know that Carly had a genetic vulnerability for the development of an eating disorder. She also had certain personality traits, temperament, that put her at the higher risk for the development of an eating disorder. She's a people pleaser. She's a perfectionist. She's a high achiever. She is a super feeler. That means she feels her emotions rather intensely. She experiences the feelings of others around her rather intensely. She's like a sponge. Well, again, I had no idea that this could be a contributing factor to an eating disorder. I also didn't realize that eating disorders don't normally walk alone. So co-occurring illnesses can contribute to the development of an eating disorder. And as I mentioned, prior to the onset, she was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and OCD. Again, there are many paths to the development of an eating disorder. This just happens to be Carly's presentation. There are a slew of stories that I could share with you all. Now, when she was initially diagnosed, she was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa restrictive, and she was around 12 or 13 years old. I missed the memo that eating disorders can actually morph into another diagnosis. So by the time she hit 16 and a half, she was staying the course, in recovery with anorexia nervosa. One day she announces to me, please videotape me. I want this on camera. And she starts eating. I didn't realize, and I don't think she did at the time, that the eating disorder was morphing into bulimia nervosa. We don't, due to time, we're not going to take a look at each one of these specific eating disorder diagnoses. But I am going to make sure that in the resource guide that I get out to you at the end of next week, that I include resources along with some videos so you all can take a deeper dive and take a closer look at each one of these diagnoses. Where I do want to spend our time is on these warning signs. Again, an eating disorder was nowhere on my radar screen. I hadn't even really heard about eating disorders. The only connection, and this is going to date me, is I remember Karen Carpenter had struggled with an eating disorder, and that was about it. So when this came about, I was missing some of the warning signs that I wish I would have been aware of. But anyway, in general, you're looking for a shift in behaviors and attitudes around weight loss, dieting, control around food. Those three areas are becoming primary concerns for your loved one. It could also be that you're noticing there's a refusal to eat certain foods like Carly, progressing to the point where they're restricting against whole categories of food. So Carly, she started by eliminating the sweets, and then she mentioned the carbs, and it was all very gradual for her. For some individuals, it's something that really happens more quickly. For others, it can take a couple of months, maybe even up to a year for everything to kind of set in place. You might notice that the individual is becoming uncomfortable eating around others. So there's just the three of us. I'm a single mom, and so I also have a younger daughter, and I always made it a point that we would have dinner together. And Carly started to come up with excuses for not sitting at the table with us. And initially, it made sense. You know, Mom, I got this project I need to work on. I'm going to take my dinner. I'm going to hit the dining room table, spread everything out, and then I'll finish up there. Then it shifted to, you know, Mom, I've got a lot of homework this week, this month, I'm just slammed. I'm going to take my dinner up to my bedroom so I can get my homework completed. And it wasn't long after that, we weren't even seeing her at the dinner table. You might be aware of food rituals. So you're actually sitting with a loved one and you're noticing excessive chewing of food, or you're noticing that they're not allowing the food on the plate to touch. Or it might be that they're starting to cut food into very tiny pieces. So be aware of those things. It might be that they're starting to skip meals, or they're taking smaller portions of food at regular meals where they weren't doing that before. It might be that you're noticing frequent trips to the bathroom after meals, or during the day, they're in the bathroom. And this one, again, when Carly's eating disorder morphed into bulimia nervosa, and what that looks like for Carly is she would restrict during the day, then she would binge eat, and that's eating a large amount of food in a short amount of time to the point where you're extremely full, very uncomfortable. And then that's followed with feelings of guilt and shame. And then she would engage in an unhealthy compensatory behavior to rid herself of those calories, so she thought. And her go-to unhealthy compensatory behavior happened to be vomiting. So in fact, what she was doing, she was leaving the table either to take food off of her plate, hide it in her jacket, or hide it in her sweatshirt to get rid of it in the bathroom, or to engage in an unhealthy compensatory behavior. Then again, I'm hearing the water throughout the day. You know, she's in the bathroom, I'm hearing the water running, or I'm hearing the radio. And I thought, wow, she is spending a lot of time either putting makeup on or doing her nails. I don't know what she's up to, when in fact, she was engaging in unhealthy compensatory behaviors. The other thing you might be noticing is possible disappearance of large amounts of food, empty wrappers or containers. Again, that could be an indication that your loved one is engaging in binge eating. There could be extreme focus, most likely extreme focus on body size and shape. There could be an increase in exercise, and exercise and movement is a good thing. When there is a level of concern is when the individual, like Carly, was not increasing her caloric intake to keep pace with the exercise she was now engaged in. The other thing you want to be aware of is that Carly, you know, she's engaged in exercise. She's out there running. I would catch her in her room doing like 200 stomach crunches in the middle of the night. On those occasions when she wasn't able to get her runs fit in, I noticed that she would get very anxious and very upset, very angry. So again, those are things you just want to have on your radar screen. And of course, noticing the isolation, the dialed up anxiety, depression, irritability, and those types of things. If you go to the National Eating Disorders Association, you'll find a more comprehensive list of some other warning signs to be aware of. But for now, I think that'll get you started. There are some screening tools that I want to make you aware of, and they highlight these warning signs that I briefly went over. And these online screening tools, not to be mistaken for an assessment tool, but just an online screening tool, they can be used in 3 different ways. So if you suspect, you intuitively feel like something is going on here, and it could possibly be an eating disorder, referring to an online screening tool can validate your concerns. The other thing that you can use these online screening tools for is you can use them to have a document to refer to that you can take to your primary care physician or an eating disorder specialist to use as a springboard for discussion. I mean, sometimes this is a very complex, it is the most complex mental illness. It is life-threatening. There are so many layers to this. There is a lot to learn. And so initially, it can be rather difficult to find the words to be able to articulate what you're observing. So referring to an online screening tool to share out with a primary care physician or a specialist can be extremely helpful. Now, some of you all are on this call and you've been supporting your loved one through recovery. An online screening tool for you all will help you keep pace with recovery. It can actually allow you to keep track of their strengths and weaknesses and where they are in the scheme of this thing. So I wish I would have thought about that a couple of years ago, because I would have gone on, completed a screening, and then a couple of months out, compared the most updated checklist that I had completed to see where Carly was in the scheme of things, and then share that out with her treatment team. That would have been very helpful, and it's something I am doing now. So having said that, go to the National Eating Disorders Association. They have an online screening tool. There is another one that's referred to as SCOFF. It's frequently used by primary care physicians. It's a pretty informal 5-question type of survey. And if you answer yes to 2 or more of the questions, then there's reason for concern and you'll want to get an assessment done. The one I want to highlight today is called Feed Your Instinct. It's out of Australia. It is a remarkable online screening tool. It's user-friendly, it's comprehensive, and what it aims to do is highlight these common warning signs that I just mentioned and then some, and then provide you all with useful information about eating or body image concerns. So when you have an opportunity, I suggest you take the time, read through each one of these 4 modules. I tell you, it won't take you longer than 45 minutes, and then complete the checklist yourself. And then that way you'll be familiar with it. I do want to mention, if you're a school professional on this call, if you're a parent on this call, a community member, I am not suggesting that you place a child in front of any of these online screening tools. Again, for today, I am recommending that you all take advantage of these screening tools, again, to either validate, have a document available that you can share out with a provider, and or to keep pace with what's going on with your loved one in recovery. Now, if there's a level of concern, next steps is that you're going to want to connect with your primary care physician or an eating disorder specialist. Run by, share with them what you're observing. If they determine a formal assessment needs to be completed, they'll do that. If there is a diagnosis, next steps is what you'll be doing is you'll locate a treatment team. And a treatment team for an eating disorder, it's a rather robust group of people. So you're going to have a physician, you're going to have a registered dietitian and a therapist, and preferably folks who specialize in eating disorders. And if medication is needed, you're going to have a psychiatrist. If your loved one is diagnosed with ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, often an OT or PT therapist will be recommended as well. And again, remember when you're thinking about these team members, it's a lot of people. Again, this is a complex mental illness. There are many layers. There are biological factors, psychological factors, and environmental factors that are a part of this that need treatment. So you need a team that can cover all of those bases. Now, at the same time that you're pulling your treatment team together, or say you are already working with the treatment team right now, you are supporting your loved one, you're moving through recovery. For all of you on this call, I strongly encourage you to take a look at this 4-part video series by Dr. Elizabeth Easton. these videos, they are a true game changer. Elizabeth Easton, I've known her since 2012. She's just incredible. She is the director of psychotherapy for the Eating Recovery Center and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety. And what these videos will do for you all as family members or community members, these videos will help you get grounded and prepared for this journey. If you're already in the throes of this, these videos will empower you to even do a better job of supporting, offering that emotional and practical support that your loved one needs, regardless, honestly, of the mental health diagnosis. These videos are appropriate for those who are moving through an eating disorder or mood or an anxiety disorder. So please take the time to take a look at those. Now, treatment goals. When it comes to treatment, there's a few things I want you to keep in mind. There are some individuals that can move through recovery with an outpatient treatment team, those team members I just mentioned. There are some individuals that require a higher level of care, maybe once, maybe twice, maybe multiple times, like my daughter. And this just means that these individuals need a heavier dose of support, okay? Now, having said that, when we're looking at these treatment goals, although there's some exceptions to these, eating disorders generally follow this sequence roughly in this order with some overlap. So you're looking at medical stabilization. Again, eating disorders are life-threatening illnesses. Someone dies by way of an eating disorder every 52 minutes. We want to make sure these individuals are medically stable, they're medically safe. Weight restoration is a part of the treatment goals. And then they'll be taking a look at nutritional management, nutritional stabilization, putting a meal plan in place. They're going to be addressing behavioral changes, including interrupting those unhealthy behaviors, binging, purging, restricting. They're going to be revisiting social skills, and they're going to be addressing emotional regulation. Now, key to treatment, in treatment and recovery, it is important to recognize that the brain follows the body in healing, okay? The brain follows the body in healing. Food is medicine when it comes to an eating disorder, and that is for all eating disorders. We know that it takes 6 months to a year of weight restoration, nutritional stabilization for that brain to fully come back online. We also know when we're talking about young people that the brain isn't fully developed. I mentioned this before, until the age of 26. So when you have someone, especially a young person, in the throes of an eating disorder, cognitive functioning is limited. That prefrontal cortex, it is impaired. It was as if Carly was in a brain fog. So in that state of mind, when you're talking about insight, motivation to change, you're talking about tapping into therapy, it doesn't really work real well initially. The body and the brain, they really need to be nourished, and food is the medicine. So if you can think about it like this, if you can think about two lamps, lamps that you have like in your den or in your bedroom, right? You have this one lamp, and it has this frayed, brittle electrical cord. And you go to plug it into the wall, and it takes a while for that current to travel to the light bulb. And once the current even gets to the light bulb, the bulb is pretty dim, right? Now you've got this other lamp, and this has a new 18 gauge cord. It's strong, it's sturdy, and you go to plug it into the wall, and it quickly supplies the current needed to light up the light bulb, and the bulb this time around lights up pretty brightly. Well, over time, when I'm thinking back about, where Carly was, as she got healthier, I saw that cord, that connection got stronger around cognitive functioning, which also impacted her emotional regulation. So at that point, she was better able to tap into therapy. So, what are some practical supports that we can offer to our loved ones as they're moving through? So, there is this article I'm definitely going to get in your hands. It's called Eating Recovery Caregiver Do's and Don'ts. And it has specific suggestions that can be implemented in the home by way of routine, by way of structure and communication. And routine and structure are so important because they equal safety. And then, of course, keeping that open communication so that you can provide, again, that ongoing emotional and practical support. So when we're talking about what are some of the do's and don'ts, there are a few that I'm going to highlight on this particular slide. And again, you'll get the full lineup in this article. But one of the things that really comes to mind for me in offering support is this avoiding heavy conversations after 8 p.m. each night. And that sounds like such a simple thing, right? And wow, was that a game changer. Carly and I, by the end of the day, we were so tired. And she'd go to school, she'd have a treatment appointment, she had a little bit of her homework she needed to complete. Neither one of us were in a space to be able to have a heavy discussion or make a decision. And I'll tell you, just that one thing alone eliminated so much conflict in our home. Another thing when we're looking at eating disorders is making that meal plan, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And often for many people moving through recovery, sticking to that snack schedule was imperative. That was a top high priority. Something else that comes to mind when I'm looking at this is realizing that lying, and that was something that Carly never engaged in prior to her eating disorder. Realizing that that was part of her eating disorder behavior, and that was a result of shame and guilt and the fact that she had engaged in some behaviors that she normally would not have participated in. And the other thing I want to mention is separating out the eating disorder from your loved one. So when I was working and supporting with Carly, at times I was like, gosh, am I talking to, am I working with, am I connecting with the eating disorder that's sitting on that shoulder of hers? Or am I talking to the Carly that I've known from way back when? Or am I talking to the Carly who developmentally should be acting this way? So there's a lot as for caregivers to have to tease out when we're supporting. The other two things I did want to mention, and again, I'll get this article in your hand, two things that all of you all can do right now once we get off this call that I would suggest is be mindful of your conversations, avoid diet and weight talk. There are so many other things that you can be focusing your time and attention on when you're connecting with your loved one. And if you're wondering, like, gosh, what are some things we could even connect around outside of that? I'm not lying when I say I went to Amazon. I got myself this box. It's called Table Topics. And these topics will keep you in conversation, and you're not centered around diet or weight at any time. So if you're looking for topics, ways to stay engaged in conversations outside of diet and weight, get yourself that box and refer to those cards. The other thing I would recommend is practice giving compliments that don't involve appearance. Start focusing on those personal qualities, things that you value and admire in your loved one. Talk about boosting self-esteem. So, having said that, school support. So support in the school setting. You may be needing to either look at getting a 504 plan, or your loved one might qualify for an IEP. There are a number of accommodations, modifications that can be put in place in the school setting. Again, I'll get you a list of suggestions that you, your treatment team, along with the school can consider. We want to get our kids to school. We want to keep them there. We want them to be successful. So we have to keep in mind they're moving through recovery. And in addition to that, they've got a lot of additional expectations placed on them because they have to see treatment providers in the afternoon. So in order to help them keep pace with their peers, you might end up looking at doing something along the lines of extended time for makeup assignments. By the time Carly finished her day at school, she went to her treatment appointment. We got home and we ate. She was exhausted. So she had the weekend to be able to make up any assignments. During the day, discussions, conversations in the hall, just the sheer number of kids could be rather triggering for her. There were those occasions where her anxiety was dialed up. There were those occasions where the eating disorder thoughts were just so heavy that she needed to be able to leave the classroom. So she had a pass that allowed her to either check in with the school nurse or to go straight to the school counselor where she could decompress, pull herself together, and then be able to return to class. It could be for some of your loved ones, because of their meal plan, they need to be allowed to be able to eat and drink during the school day. We had approved locations and times for Carly so that she could make sure that she was able to follow that meal plan. Last thing I want to mention, for some of our loved ones, they need so much structure and support around lunch that they really need either someone in the school to be able to sit with them, monitor their lunch, or they need a family member to come up and spend some time with them at lunch to make sure that they complete their meals. So it's those types of things you'd want to consider to put in a 504 plan or an IEP plan. There was something that just came up. This is just hot off the press, and this has to do with school planning as well. And I'm going to mention the National Alliance for Eating Disorders in a second. They just created letters for parents and guardians to keep diet culture out of the classroom. So in some schools, they require weigh-ins. In some schools, the teachers will require assignments that are around good foods, bad foods. And some schools, they have this food police type of setup in the cafeteria. So I want you all to be aware of this resource now. They have created these letters that you can tailor to meet your own needs that you can share out in your school setting. And then the last thing that I want to mention, we're wrapping things up here, is that some of you all might be on this call and you're looking for some scripts, some ways to better communicate when you realize that your loved one is experiencing a slip or a hiccup in recovery or a lapse. And these particular scripts I found to be useful because they are non-judgmental, they're non-threatening, they come from a place of love and concern. I'll just share 3 of these out, and then we're gonna take a look at some additional resources. So one script might go along or sound something like this. You know, Carly, I'm wondering if you're struggling with some negative self-talk. I'm noticing that you have some new marks on your wrist. Or it could be a script that goes something like this. You know, I'm wondering if there's something that's been stressing you out lately. I noticed that the scale that we put away, it's back in your bedroom and it's in your closet. So I just want to check in with you around that. It could be this third script is, you know, Carly, I'm thinking I need to do a better job right now supporting you. You know, we're sitting here at the table, you're pushing your food around your plate and you're not completing the meal. So with that, there are a number of things and things that we can do and we can say, and I want to just throw out a few additional resources that I'm going to get in your hands by the end of next week. And I'm going to start off by saying the National Eating Disorder Association, they have parent toolkit, educator toolkit, coach toolkit for you all to, at no cost, be able to download. The National Eating Disorders Association, they have a number of resources available Feast is another organization, although it's international. We in the States can tap into what they have to offer. I'm going to get these books in your hands that I would highly suggest that you refer to. The Eating Disorder Trap would be my go-to if you're just starting this journey. Loving Someone with an Eating Disorder by Dana Heron if you're supporting an adult. If you're supporting a child, an emerging adult, get that book By Their Side by Laura Lynn Bell. And then these websites are amazing. Eating Disorders from the Inside Out offers a video, and then Anorexia Modern Eating Disorder Treatment, another amazing video for you all to spend some time with. Quick shout out to Eating Recovery Center. If you're in need of higher level of care, I just can't say enough good things about all they have to offer. You might not need higher level of care, but you're looking for some additional resources. They offer at no cost, no commitment, caregiver support groups for those who are directly impacted. They have a YouTube channel loaded with a variety of topics presented by experts in the field. You might be looking for CE events, so you'll go to the professional tab. You might even want a podcast, and they have mental note podcasts with stories around hope and recovery. So with that, I know that was a whirlwind. I just want to thank you all. Here's my contact information, and that'll be included in the resource guides next week. My time is up, so I am going to stop sharing my screen here. I got my little nudge, and Lisa Bloom is going to take it from here, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So I'll stop sharing my screen, Amy. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that was fantastic. You cannot imagine how many times I was nodding my head. I related to so much of what you said, Beth Ann, and you shared remarkably good information. We do have questions, so
Right.
We're going to get to that as quickly as we can. Lisa Bloom is a social worker. She is the professional relations liaison at the Eating Recovery Center. She's a great friend of Catch, and she joins us today to share some of the treatment resources available to our community's families. We will get on with questions and answers as soon as she has done that. Lisa Bloom.
Hi, thank you, Amy, and thank you, Catch, and thank you, Beth Ann, for having another opportunity to watch you talk and listen to your important and impactful and very relatable story. Two important takeaways, and only two from me. First off, I am actually from your community. I grew up there. I have nephews and nieces that live there, and everything is very near and dear to my heart in terms of all of the challenges that our young people have. So two important takeaways. One, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I am here to assist with questions about treatment at higher levels of care and begin the often very daunting process. Two, as Beth Ann discussed, treatment is available when outpatient care isn't enough support. At ERC and Pathlight, we provide all higher levels of care, both eating disorders and mood, anxiety, and trauma-related conditions. Here in Northbrook at Lake Cook and Sanders, we provide residential through intensive outpatient, including virtual intensive outpatient for children and adolescents, all gender expressions and identities, ages 10 through 17. Again, when needed, help is available. Please reach out for it. Thank you so much for all you do for our community.
Thank you, Lisa, for all you do. Thank you very much. We're going to dive right in here, Beth Ann, and you and I can talk. We can share all the questions that we've gotten from the audience and just get as much information out there as we can through conversation. So why don't we start with a couple that have come in from people attending today. I want to get to those right off the top. And the first is, what if our loved one doesn't have all the symptoms that you listed? How many do I need to look for in order to be concerned or seek help?
Yeah, what a great question. Now, I'm going to start off by saying I always err on the side of safety. So if intuitively you feel like there is an unhealthy relationship with food and or exercise, to really seek out an eating disorder specialist in your community and get feedback from them. Oftentimes it's based on frequency, duration of the behavior. Again, it's that shift in attitudes and behaviors that I talked about earlier. And so you want to be proactive. That's what I wish I would have been. And I didn't know what to look for. And so I could have gotten a jump on this. So in my opinion, disordered eating can be just as threatening to our individuals as an eating disorder, because it really interrupts their ability to fully engage in life. So that would be my response to that.
Yeah, and one of the things that my daughter described is that the monster of the eating disorder, that of course she named Ed, only gets bigger and bigger and takes up more and more of your brain. So that if you think that there is a possibility that disordered eating could be leading to a more severe eating disorder, know that in their brain, it's important to get there fast, because this is a mental illness and it is one that is extraordinarily hard to treat. So I agree with what you said. I think that's good advice. We've had a couple of questions along the same lines as this one. What do we do if our child is over 18, doesn't want to get help, doesn't want to know if there's an eating disorder or recognize that there's a problem? How do we handle that? That's a tough one.
My daughter's 24. So
mine is 21 now.
Yeah.
So, and I've said many times, even though I'm not grateful that she got sick when she was as young as she was, it does make it easier when you have control or some control over helping them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first thing I want to mention is that for some individuals who we're an extra set of eyes, and we're observing these behaviors, is to recognize sometimes, and this is in the DSM-5 for anorexia nervosa, there are some individuals who really don't recognize that they have an issue, that there is a reason for concern, that they are engaging in unhealthy behavior. So that's first off. The second thing, as I mentioned earlier, if they've been in the throes of malnutrition or nutritional instability for a period of time, their cognitive functioning, their brain has been hijacked. So when you think that you're able to sit down and have this rational conversation with them, they're really truly challenged, having a difficult time connecting with what you're saying. And so sometimes just to even bring it to their awareness, some of those scripts that I mentioned at the end of the presentation, where you just bring it to their attention. I've just been noticing lately that, you haven't been as engaged with your friends, or I've noticed that you haven't seemed as excited about your schoolwork as you used to be. So pointing out things initially, and then possibly suggesting to them, I'm wondering if there's just something going on that our general practitioner could pick up on to help you feel maybe just a little bit more connected, feel a little bit better about yourself, because chances are, either physically, emotionally, mentally, they do realize they might be a little off. So to answer that question, right, what is the leverage, right? Amy, that's the question. What leverage do you use in order?
Does it make sense? And you're the expert here, but does it make sense to encourage a young woman or man to seek some counseling support, some help with their mental, emotional well-being, so that then they can access the potential of discussing the eating disorder?
Yeah, exactly, Amy. You're reading my mind. Yeah, because that is not as threatening it seems not to be as threatening. You know, I spent a lot of time on college campuses, and mental health is out there. Kids are talking about it. They're wanting to support each other. The number of influencers that kids are following now. So getting in, maybe to address again that mental piece, possible the anxiety and the depression, that would be a foot in. And then the other thing, just due to time, I would encourage you all to join one of those caregiver support groups, because that's where you can get a lot of great ideas on leveraging your support with your adults that you're working with. I know that.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. And, you know, it reminds me that I wanted to say something briefly, and that was that neither of us underestimate how difficult and exhausting and terrifying it is to support a loved one who has an eating disorder. So while Beth did such a good job sharing a lot of ways in which to do that and ways to engage, help, you know, and be helpful, we do not in any way underestimate how terrifying or scary it is. And so I agree with you, reaching out to those support groups is really important. It helps you with ways to engage, but also just feels so much less alone.
Yeah, because it can be really scary, terrifying, as you said, Amy, to make a suggestion to your loved one, because as a parent, you think if I say the wrong thing, it might make things worse.
Well, that leads me to the next question, actually.
Yeah.
And let's just dive right in here. What if my teen is depressed and I'm scared to confront them about an eating disorder because they've talked about suicide and I don't want to push them over the edge?
Yes. That's exactly where I was headed with that. You know, two things come to mind. The first is, because we have limited time on here, I would suggest reaching out to an eating disorder specialist as a parent for yourself to get support on how to navigate that discussion. The other thing I would suggest, so that's right off the bat. There's also an incredible book specific to depression, and excuse the name of the title of this book, but it's called The No Bullshit Guide to Depression. I can't tell you how many parents say to me that was one of the best books they've ever picked up and read to help support their loved one as they were navigating depression and to help get them to treatment. So I want to throw that book out your way as well. And then, Amy, as you mentioned, once you get into a therapist, then they can pick up from there and address the eating disorder if that's something that needs to be talked about.
How do you screen a pediatrician or a primary doctor to determine if they truly understand eating disorders? Like, what would be some questions that you would ask?
You know, what I did is when I initially was seeking out treatment, when I first set foot in the office, the first thing I asked that specialist was, hey, what are the latest books you've read? And what conferences do you attend that you would recommend to your colleagues? And that was an eye-opener for me. Of course, the other thing to ask them is, what type of training do you have? And how frequently do you attend ongoing training as well, and from where? So that's the route I personally take. And it's also about the therapeutic relationship too. So you might have someone who is highly trained, but they still might not be the right fit for your loved one. So keep that in mind as well. That's something to consider. I don't know, Amy, what else can you think of along those lines?
Well, in all honesty, I never felt as though my daughter's pediatrician understood any of it. So I am not necessarily the right person to ask. And my mind is so fuzzy back to those days, in all honesty. I mean, I think just frank conversation, again, is the way to get to it. yeah, I'm not sure that's a satisfactory answer, but that's what I got.
Be honest.
We have a couple other questions that have come in, and a couple are tied together. One is, can you share a little bit about how stressful times like the pandemic and the world at large can contribute to an increase in eating disorders? And to my mind, this ties in with, why is an eating disorder such a serious mental health issue?
Okay, let me start by answering how there are many layers to an eating disorder. So I mentioned this before, where there are biological factors, and that includes your genetics, the dieting, the puberty, right, and all those changes that take place during that time. Then you're looking at psychological factors, and that includes those co-occurring illnesses, trauma, and that can include micro traumas as well, abuse, and stress. Because remember what I mentioned earlier, are many people who are struggling, they're super feelers. So they are feeling their emotions, they're feeling the emotions of others very strongly. It's just like oozing out of them, if you will. They're like sponges. The other layer to this is that environmental or socio-cultural environment, and that's that messaging that we're getting around appearance standards, weight-based comments, and messages from social media. So that speaks to the complexity. It's not just one thing, right? It's a combination, it's a complex interplay, if you will, of all of these factors. So when you're talking about, I think you had mentioned like this isolation, right? And the stress, we know how important connection is, right? And so when you are isolating from others, that sure gives you a lot of time to think. And if you are genetically vulnerable, if you have these temperament, these personality traits, wow, you start really going, for many individuals, to a really negative space. And you start thinking things that get magnified. And then because of the number of layers, the contributing factors, maintenance factors just set in, and it snowballs, if you will. I hope that isolation.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think the words that you used, maintenance factors, I guess I might use the words like, control factors, or some way to ease the sensations with which you are uncomfortable.
Right.
That can lead to disordered eating and control over your eating. And it's really complicated, but I think that does explain why particularly stressful times can see an increase.
Yeah.
I have to be mindful of our time. We are almost out, but there is one or a couple more questions from the audience that I want to get to. And one of them is, are there other ideas of ways to support at school in it, outside of an IEP or a 504? And one of the things that comes to mind for me that was really, really helpful with my daughter, and I was lucky in that I took a leave of absence from work, and so I was able to do this, but part of her 504 was that she came home and ate her lunch at home every day, which was necessary for her to get the nutrition she needed, but also gave her a break from having to navigate school, which was extraordinarily difficult. That's one that came to mind for me.
Yeah.
We also kept snacks in the nurse's office so that when she needed to re-nourish or just take a break, she could do that in the privacy of the nurse's office.
And having that pass to be able to go to the nurse's office. And I always preferred the nurse's office because your school counselors are not always available. So that's, you knew the health nurse was always going to be there, right? But I think there are some schools outside of a formal 504 plan or an IEP There are some schools that will, if you sit down and you talk to them, you share out with them the treatment team's recommendations, they are willing, outside of a 504 plan or an IEP, to be able to put some things in place. You don't have to have a formal 504 plan. For example, like Amy, you were suggesting, to be able to have your kid come home and eat with you. Or for you to go up to the school and have lunch with them, or for a staff member to say, hey, during my planning period, Carly can come in and have her lunch with me and bring a friend. So it doesn't need to be that formal. There are some things, like if you are looking to have them pull out of a health class or a PE class, that's a whole different ball game, because I know in the state of Virginia, it is required that they participate and attend PE. Now we were a little flexible on the health lessons, but actually being a part of PE class was something we had to figure out. So Carly, what we did is we set something up in the summertime that was a little bit more flexible so that she could engage in like yoga. We did something, we're in the South, so they had line dancing, so we could get a little creative. But yeah, I think it's just, again, having that honest conversation with the school about what's going on and making sure you have documentation from your treatment team is rather helpful if you're willing and able to do that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
I want to be mindful. We are at 12. Well, I guess we're at 1 o'clock where you guys are. We're at 1 o'clock. I would like to end though with a little bit of hope because this is a really heavy topic and it's a really frightening topic. But I think Beth Ayn and I both are testament to the fact that there is recovery available. Recovery is possible. It's not linear by any stretch of the imagination. Isn't linear, but I think I would like to leave people with the knowledge that there are resources out there to help, right? And please feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll connect you with Beth Ayn and Lisa if they can be of further help to you. I am more than happy to talk with any of you who might want a little more information about parenting through something like this. So before we log off, I just want to thank you so much for bringing this important and amazing conversation to our community. It means the world to me, and I know it means the world to the Catch team too.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be with you all today. Thank you.